And this is Roundtable, so the third part of this symposium. I'd like to welcome three participants, Professor Vladimíra Dvořáková, who is teaching at Czech Technical University, but she's well known also as having other academic positions and leading expert on Czech politics. I'd like to welcome Petr Honzejk, the editor of the newspaper Hospodářské noviny, economic newspaper. He is a well-known, popular commentator on Czech politics. And I would also like to welcome Mrs. Monika Ladmanová, who is an advisor of the Czech European Commissar Věra Jourová. So these names can set the framework for this roundtable. It is obvious that this symposium concerns primarily the Czech liberal democracy, but this is well, the Czech democracy is not isolated from the other Central European and European countries. Because the Czech Republic is a member of the European Union, and I was thinking, where should this roundtable be directed, or where the emphasis should be put, and maybe that we wouldn't duplicate the topics of the morning panels, sessions. The first questions to be asked is about the prospects of liberal democracy in Central Europe. So what is the situation and the future of liberal democracy in Central Europe, in your opinion? And I'd like to ask Professor Dvořáková for the introductory speech. Oh, well, you haven't made me very happy by inviting me first. Alphabetical order, I guess. Oh, okay, also I'll try to comment on this. And we often perceive that there is a deterioration of liberal democracy. And maybe the first question for me is if a country in Central Europe has ever achieved the state of consolidated liberal democracy or respects liberal democracy, which has consolidated features, and I'm afraid that this is not the case. And I'm afraid that since the beginning of transformation in the Czech Republic, many things have been underestimated and not finished, not completed. Well, we all know what was happening in the 1990s, but from the institutional point of view, we have never built a proper state administration and institutions which accompany the liberal democracy. Well, many people speak of populism, but the problem that the accountability of which I've been speaking since the 1990s has never been established in this country, and we can see where the problems are now. And recently there was an issue of the Office for Economic Competition, And we can see how this institution is deliberately set not to be able to function perfectly. So the way how management or chairman are chosen, what were the initial conditions. We can see the National Control Institute. It is spoken a lot about now, and it is one of few institutions in the Czech Republic which functions very well since the 1990s. And the reason is that it was well established at the start, and it's interconnected with international environment. They were creating international standards, and regardless of the situation and the way the institution was established, as that it's still independent. Since 2011, they have been promised to get more power in the regions, and this has not happened. But there have never been established and completed controlling institutions. And so people sometimes do not like this or that politicians, but basically they are contented with democracy in other countries. But the basis is that it's not about better or worse politicians, but it's more about dismantling institutions instead of building them. So I can't, I'm not very positive in this respect. It's interesting that there was a pressure on the European Union after the new countries accessed the European Union. And so this is for the introduction. Yes, that's enough. And I hand over to Petr Honzejk. Basically, I agree that in the Czech Republic and in neighboring Central European countries, there is a huge problem with insufficient function of institutions. But I'd also like to say that any social system, well, which is not oppressive or authoritarian, non-democratic or dictatorship, well, is based on social agreement, and this is important. And if we have a social agreement which would require the liberal democracy, including its institutions, which then may improve and start functioning well, so then we will have the liberal democracy. But if not enough people are convinced that the liberal democracy is the best political system, which agrees to their expectations from life, from the world, from political sphere, and the share of politics in their well-being or set good conditions, so then it's going to be a problem. What happened in all the Central European countries, including the Czech Republic, is that the liberal democracy with its poorly functioning institutions did not manage to persuade most people that it is the optimum political system, liberal democracy. And many people started to started choosing different political models. Well, this happened in Austria and Poland, and also in the Czech Republic there are such tendencies that the forces came to power and they spoke about the uselessness of Senate or incompetency of parliament. Andrej Babiš, if he does not like the decision of the Constitutional Court, starts sharply criticize it. And there are attacks against independent media, public service. And what is fundamental is that what matters is a social agreement for the political system. And I'm relatively optimistic with the COVID pandemic demasked the fact that some regimes or political parties which incline to be authoritarian and which do not like the liberal democracy institutions, in reality, they are not able to cope with the crisis. We can see that the worst situation in the Czech Republic, in the world, in COVID. Hungary is also a disaster. Poland has the third wave of COVID pandemic, and Slovakia has also a very poor situation in terms of COVID. So we can see that the rulers or leaders who are non-liberally oriented cannot cope with the crisis. They can divide the society and take advantage of it, but they are not able to solve real problems. They can take advantage of problems which they create by themselves, such as migration crisis. But if a real problem comes, they fail, and the people can see it. So we can see how the election preferences are developing in the Czech Republic, that the law and justice is losing in Poland. Fidesz is going down in Hungary, and the people realize that they have to act, or the liberal parties realize that they have to act jointly, and it looks promising in the Czech Republic, in Hungary too. So I think that in the post-COVID times, I can see the renaissance of liberal democratic model, not just in Central Europe, but all around the world. Now I'd like to invite Mrs. Ladmanová. Thank you for inviting me to this roundtable. And I do not appear in the Czech environment so often as Professor Dvořáková or Petr Honzejk, and this is a good opportunity for me to come back to my home scene from Europe. And I think democracy at the moment faces some problems, and this is not for the first time, neither for the last time. An interesting thing is that there are several reasons for the situation. There are some attacks, or far right, far left attacks from outside on European democracy, attacks from inside the European Union, the member states, and also the current digital revolution, which has some consequences and impacts on democracy. I think the internet connection has failed. The world will change after the pandemic, and Petr Honzejk said that liberal democracy didn't succeed in convincing people in Central Europe, and I agree to this. My favorite philosopher, Ivan Krastev, spoke about the end of the age of imitation. revolution. And his theory is built on the fact that the revolutions in Central European Union that took place in 1989 were not traditional revolutions in the sense that we would really just change the regime and establish a brand new one. We just wanted to adapt our regime to Western democracies.
We try to get as close to Western democracies, or what we consider to be Western democracies, and what we call liberal democracies based on some attributes, so rule of law, equality, and the adherence to basic rights, balance, checks and balances, and of course, fair and free elections. But the fulfillment or the feeling that we did come up to our model never appeared, not even after we joined the EU. And Mrs. Dvořáková said that. And this has been emphasized by the financial crisis in 2008, from which we never come back to the original situation, and we may have decided that we're never going to imitate the West again. I believe that this is really so, that the teenage years, the puberty, where the young adult want to be independent and take his own route, knowing full well that that can be a very dangerous, the journey strewn with problems, and we will probably be also influenced by the developments outside the country. I will remain optimistic, just as Mr. Honzejk, and I will be followed by motto one of my gurus, Mr. Soros. He said that open society is meaningful only when we are willing to fight for it. And to this extent, I believe that the fatigue is not that big, and there is still energy enough here in Europe to really fight for it. It seems that the prospects of the Czech Republic and elsewhere is twofold. That at one hand, it's still it's worthwhile fighting for it. On the other hand, the liberal democracy in the Czech Republic or in Central Europe has been tempted very strongly to start using different routes, not better ones. We have heard a number of interesting ideas and interesting phenomena. I would like to divide these ideas into various layers where the temptations are for liberal democracy. We mentioned political institutions, something which is very important for undermining and supporting liberal democracy. The role of political culture has been mentioned, which is not oriented towards liberal democracy as in other countries. Political actors have been mentioned who actively against the concept of liberal democracy. The Central Europe's problem may lie in the fact that these phenomena act all at the same time. In a number of countries, Central or Western Europe, the concept of liberal society is in better condition there. But you will almost never find all these phenomena in one country. There may be some of them present who clash with good political institutions, or the situation may be shattered by economic crisis, but there may be some other actors who are able and capable of acting within liberal framework. Our problem is that we face all these problems at the same time together. To be more specific, in the Czech Republic, how could we specify that? If we look at the institutional sphere, are there any institutions in the Czech Republic that contribute to the threat to liberal democracy, or are there some other institutions which are able to effectively protect liberal democracy? What is your opinion of that? I'm not going to ask you to speak in turn, so you may start speaking as you wish. But I can't ask for the floor. You have managed, I know. I believe that I heard two questions there. I'll start with the second question. Speaking about the Czech Republic, in the Central European area is better off. If we were to average the situation of political institution situations compared to Western Europe, we're not very well off, but we are fairly well off relatively. There are some institutions here that prevented what was fairly openly declared by the Senate majority in 2017, constitutional changes which would lead to a majority electorate system, which would lead to the power of political political powers of ANO would be conserved. They stated that parliamentarian institutions should be restricted, no Senate, only lower chamber of the parliament, reduce the number of ministries. All that led to centralization in decision-making within one center. Institutions in the Czech Republic were able to prevent that. They helped to defend the Senate, which is a safeguard, and we managed to do that. It is not possible to adopt constitutional changes which would lead to the situation I described. Another thing is the Constitutional Court. That is a strong opponent, at present at least, under Mr. Rychetski's presidency, opponent to the transfer of illiberal democracy. These are the two key institutions. On the other hand, there are institutions that either do not operate well or have been colonized, literally colonized by proponents of illiberal model. We see that in cases like in how individual state institutions approach the question of clash of interest of Mr. Babiš, where Babiš has his loyals, institutions favor his position, like central Bohemian region, Ms. Ladmanová. She holds the situation firmly in her hands, and she really does not respond at all to reports from the German tax authorities about the irregularities, about the Čapí hnízdo center and so on. These institutions do not work well. For example, the Office of the Supervision of Political Functioning of Political Parties. The institutions which are colonized by illiberal proponents are many. Compared to Poland and Hungary, however, we still have institutions that stand firmly. I hope that it will not be Maginot Line that can be circumvented.
Samozřejmě, když si člověk nevypnete mikrofon, tak se už povídá vždycky. Ale já jsem se smála Maši na tvý lidi, protože to je možná...
That reference to marginate lines really clearly describes the problem. That line of defense should not be bypassed. And there are some battles that had to be fought. I'm not really sure whether the struggle is directed in the right direction, whether we are not focused with the discussion in the society on less fundamental topic. And it seems to me that we are dispersed, that we do not distinguish what is marginal and what is fundamental. As far as institutions are concerned, I mentioned the NKU, the National Supervisory Office, or the Constitutional Court. It doesn't matter whether you agree 100% with each and every finding. Constitutional Court operates well, comes up with opinions. Opinions are rational. But you can argue this or that. The situation with the control office, when it comes up with an opinion and the government says that they are not competent to come up with this situation. As far as institution is concerned, I believe that the things are generalized in an improper way. Most people this clash of interest in Babiš, for most people, do not care in the least. It seems to them as a very natural situation. Very often they take it as an attack from the Brussels. You said something, it was the Supreme Audit Office. You said something about we are not able, the Central Europe is not able to resolve problems. Mr. Honzejk said that. This is really something about the way institutions operate. Pandemic is an enormous problem, but where we fail is in really very minor problems which come naturally, like distribution of vaccines or testing sets. These things are not continuously done, and this shows that the situation is in incompetent hands. But we very often forget. We forget how difficult it was to register a car bought in another country. But when we come into crisis, then we run across this problem again and again, that there is no standard normal procedure which would make it possible to resolve ordinary things. That is, I believe, one of very fundamental things. And as far as reconstruction of the state, we spoke about how people perceive democracy. So in what way? I would like to know what is the result of public opinion survey, like asking them, do you think that this or that should be a part of democracy? But they say, okay, you have elections in Hungary, so Why do you fret? Another thing I wanted to say, which I consider important from the institution's point of view, I read Umberto Eco's essays, so the same situation appears elsewhere. Institutions are being eliminated, are being abolished in order that a politician can come into direct contact with citizens, because he is the one who resolves things. I read an article about India, where a member of parliament says that people come to him to resolve problems. They do not go to authorities, because authorities will not be able to do it. But if you abolish some offices, then you are able to resolve things for somebody else. When I got the telephone number to some candidates, I remembered a series from it was an ambulance Czech series. So where they discuss a problem. I'm going to call the municipal Communist Party office. I'm going to go, and problem will be resolved. This is unbelievable continuity. There are no procedures in place. I will call somebody who's going to see to it, although that municipal Communist Party office has no right to perhaps resolve that particular problem. This system allows this behavior to be propagated, to continue. The clash of interest and people who do not care, this is testified by the fact that ordinary people will consider it very, very natural that specialists from specific companies will become public officials at the Ministry of Defense, for example, and that they will influence the development of situation. The public just did not seem to care.
Phone number of Andre, yes. I also remembered that this is an example that our Prime Minister didn't understand the role of institutions. Yes, but there is one thing. I agree, but I think that the misunderstanding what Andrej Babiš represents in this country, it's a specific Czech manifestation of non-liberal movement or wave in Central Europe. And when Andrej Babiš started as Prime Minister, I spoke to many people from civil sector, and people were really upset that institutions were not working, municipalities were not working, and they were very dissatisfied. Also, like, for instance, in Australia, if someone wants to change something, they call their member of parliament, but it didn't work like that in this country. So people from the civil sector told me, look, I will go and see Andrej Babiš directly, but I said, but what if his motivation is to support his business? But they answered me with an argument. If he is able to ensure functioning state and functioning institutions and state self-administration to serve people, so it is worth it. No matter that he gets several billions of crowns, this is worth it. And then they found out that the billions are flowing into his pockets, but the institutions haven't improved. So now their opinion is different. there is a huge disillusion on the development of this society since the 1990s, that we were not able to build a good state, a partner state, which is able to take care of the society. I will relate to the original question and to Central European region. This is a comparison which puts the Czech Republic in a better light. We have fair and independent elections in the Czech Republic. And we have independent judiciary. And if we compare it with Poland, there's an attack constitution which is led by the actors of constitutionality. This is without unprecedented. And we still have independent and plural media, but this is the situation is fragile. So we have to closely watch what is happening with the public media, and we have dynamic civil society. The non-profit sector is functional, and so far there have not been any tendencies to abolish it, like in Hungary or in Poland. So I do not want to say that the Czech Republic is perfect, but I would like to put a different perspective. So if I compare with Belgium, the first wave of pandemic was a disaster in Belgium. Now it's better, but no one has a blueprint how to deal with the pandemic. Of course, there are many victims and so on. But in Belgium, the first 4 months of a pandemic, the Prime Minister, Sophie Wilmès, when she went to a hospital for a visit, so there was the staff who were turned their backs into her symbolically, saying that you did not manage the situation. And also in the Czech Republic, not everything functions well. And it is important to maintain independence of courts. And the big issue is the interfering of presidential power into executive power, which is endangering democratic principles. Like if the president says which ministers he does not like and that they should leave. Yes, the Czech case, or what you mentioned, interfering of president in the politics, which is not constitutional. But I can also draw a slight optimism, right? Because in spite of stamina or persistence of Miloš Zeman, and that he doesn't have to take any considerations for consequences of his acts. That in spite of this, he has not managed to control institutions. And after all, the media and judiciary are not at such a big risk like in other Central European countries. On the independence of courts, independence, plurality of the media are things which are most in danger. They are in the first line. And if these are defeated, then the road to illiberal democracy is open. Political culture. It is difficult concept to grasp, but it was mentioned in different contexts here today. So if we want to have a liberal democracy, and what we are willing to do for the state to function well. In other words, what's the relationship of Czech political culture? I don't mean just political elites, but I mean the Czech public. So how, what do you think the Czech people expect? What do they think is important? Do you think we are too far from the liberal democratic way of seeing the politics, the state, the institutions? Okay, I'm going to start this time. For me, it is striking or surprising, or well, I think that the post-COVID time will be very difficult to continue the trust in the state. What Professor Dvořáková mentioned that for instance, how come that the state did not prepare for the vaccination and so on? So the state wasn't able to protect human lives. And I think this is a big problem, and it will be very difficult to build the trust again. And regardless of the current political culture of elites, the basal trust in the state has been greatly shattered. The post-COVID situation will be difficult, I expect. And the political culture, its development, I think the basis was that at the time when it started, there was a great solidarity among people, lots of support, lots of help. But the state didn't appreciate the solidarity among people and rewarded the willingness of people to do something more like making masks and so on. And they were not appreciated. No thanks from the state. The state did not support them at all. These were lonely, independent individuals who were helping other people. But many things at the beginning of the pandemic, there are many institutes of the Academy of Science, universities. They start manufacturing protective aids or looking for meanwhile solutions, and the state did not support them at all. There were companies which offered that they could supply face masks and so on. But the state did not respond to it at all. And the situation was that people got together. They pulled one roof, but and the motto was that your face mask protects me and my face mask protects you, and this disappeared completely. So the arguments pro wearing face mask did not mention solidarity anymore, that it is important to be considerate, to be solidary. So the idea of solidarity vanished, and the society was divided again, and the state was incapable of ensuring things which they were expected to.
That gave rise to mistrust and unwillingness of people to follow various directives, not to mention the fact that the public officials didn't show any respect to their own decrees. People asked why the government didn't do what it was supposed to do. In the first stage, the government cut itself away from the rest of the people, and it lost its support. That is the political culture that I believe will play an important role over a long period of time. When people say, why do you exert yourself, nobody's going to appreciate that, nobody's going to like it at all.
Já bych tomu dodal, to tady jako vlastně se bavíme na té úrovni, jako
we are talking as if there was an abstract state around us, something that is above people, not functional. People see that and they behave as if it was not their state. But state is being ruled by somebody, and the state is what rulers are. I wrote an article which said the COVID's fish smells start smelling from the head. And if we have a political elite impersonated by the prime minister who must control everything personally, he concerns himself with micromanagement, whose motto is, well, you have my telephone number, and must present himself as if he was able to manage everything. People, consequently, people below him either are afraid of doing something because they would make mistakes, or others are not being heard. If the one who controls everything could not look like he was able to manage everything himself. And that may be the explanation of fall in preferences of ANO. Czech society perhaps finally understood that this is not the proper way. What government did is what government is able to do. It is another way how to divide the society. And this is what I reproach most to the government. If we come to understand that the society is being divided between people who accept lockdown and tragic events in their families, nothing happened to them. These are the old age pensioners, public officials, and other groups. And then there are people, and I believe that it was conscious, that the government refused to help them, and they find themselves in enormous financial problems. they live from one day to another. And this is another dividing line here. And it will take a long time. It will take a really long time to pull oneself together, to come out of it. And it will take a long time before we are able to really look and try to face and resolve real problems that will appear before us. All failures then we can ascribe to the government shows that the populism which used to be viewed as one possible way to get away from rather fatigued political elite is shown something that system that cannot really improve things. They can only transform, shift the resolution of problems to technocratic solutions. This did not prove successful, and this also is the hope that some people after this lesson may start looking for some more traditional approaches of liberal democracy solutions. Now, very briefly, I would like to open up a fairly complicated issue, particularly in this Eurosceptical environment in the Czech Republic. How in this struggle between liberal and other democracies in Central Europe, how can that struggle be helped or made more complicated by the EU? What is the role of EU what is the role that can be played by EU in resolving problems that we face in Central Europe? Let me start. To tell the truth, the European Union has enormous possibilities, good tools to do that. If I'm not pessimistic, if somebody allocates lots of money, then he has a lot of possibilities to influence the rules. The thing is that the EU should be viewed not as a policeman who meddles with everything, but it should constitute the basic framework rule of law, the observance of some basic principles, things that are anchored in EU. I believe that it has a lot of tools to influence member states. The value orientation that to some extent is different in the West and in the East. There are some differences in those two areas, in priorities, in values, in resolving some problems. I feel like sometimes it happened that problems that society did not view as difficult for some time, but later it began to see them as difficult, came from outside and clashed with obstacles in the 90s. When I remember when all kinds of associations were being set up and things, the basic problem was that nobody had money. Nobody knew how to do accounting, and people had two shoe boxes, and they put bills in the two boxes, depending on whether they paid or received money. And the West then came up with a special kind of accounting charter. But people knew what to resolve. The money came from the West. They helped a lot. But the topics, what is to be resolved, also came from the West. People said, well, we have to get some money, but they said, look, we have some money that can help do this or that. But it was not the other way around. If there was no special program for specific area, then it was difficult to get the money. But of course, if you give the money, then they also transfer their idea of doing things. Non-NGOs stopped looking for where our problem is. They started trying to find out what are the problems that will generate them subsidies. Sometimes it was counterproductive. Particularly, we did not find the route like this they would say this is a difficult problem at a local level. I don't mean big political problems or anything, but people were not able to say we're going to focus on this or that problem because we view it as an important problem, and that perhaps meant that some stimulus from these problematic countries, some support to local problems there did not exist, and perhaps perhaps not to transfer ideas from west to the east should have been thought. I believe that is a very, very good approach. In Central Europe, all Central Europe said they want us to do something, and so they, okay, we're going to do it, and we'll get the money for it. This reminds me of when I was in Romania in the 1990s. They were discussing the entry into EU, and one thing was to changes in waste law, and they had special bins on the railway stations for individual types of waste. But then we saw that all the waste was then transferred to a single bag. So this was also the way we transformed the institutions. And so the situation really corresponds to what we have done, and people are not stupid and see that. I believe that, yes, we can agree with that. To answer your questions, what European Union should do to help to contribute to the spread of non-liberal ideas in member states? The answer is simple: to insist on its constitutional principles, Copenhagen principles. This is not only free trade, but also rule of law and real democracy. And if they insist on that, okay, you will be entitled to some assistance only if you are going to observe the European values, not only based on economy, but also social ideas. If you do not observe those principles, you're not going to get the money. That would be a strong motivation for political elites. These political elites define the environment to a certain large extent, and they need the money for that. And this is no extortion, although the Poles in particular say that this is a fairly, very, very fair approach. The principle of the EU is not based only on no duty paid on exports, but because we live in continent where there has been no war for the past many decades. So democratic principles are important. This is the puppet theater situation, and if the EU is going to implement that through the parliament, so I believe that it will work.
Jako poslední právě jsem chtěla si poslechnout vlastně to,
I wanted to hear what you would propose, and I quite identify with what you've said regarding the export of project priorities from the West to the East. That, I believe, is associated with the fatigue and the end of the time of imitation. Before we entered in EU, I was a member of the NGO. There were very few of us. And all of a sudden, there was an explosion of the number of, not false, but slapped together NGOs based on the fact that they can get money for the action. What can we do to limit or link the payment of subsidies to the existence of the rule of law? We managed to do that thanks to Ms. Jourová's proposal in 2017, when these problems first appeared, when it looked something unrealistic. But we managed to do that, and the protection of the union budget, of the new money starting from 1st January, is based on the fact that the state adheres to, observes the principle of rule of law. Hungary and Poland attacked that, appealed against that at the European Court of Justice. They said that they were willing to support the budget, which they need to get the money, but they were willing to support it only if they were eligible to the money, whether whether the principle is constitutional, in parallel with the judicial process. The methodology is being developed, how this principle will be adhered to in practice. And the expectation is that in the autumn, we will get the decision of the Court of Justice and the publishing of the methods, and also court action will be initiated against some member states.
At the same time, what can the European Union do? I'm going to give a specific example. So one of the three pillars is adherence to the rule of law, and the other principles, but the European Commission launched or issued in September 2020 the report on state of rule of law in the European Union. So this report assesses the situation and describes the tendencies. The report has 4 chapters. The first one is on independence, quality, and efficiency of the judiciary. The second chapter is ability to fight corruption. Third, independence of media, and the fourth chapter is on the checks and balance, or if also institutions like an ombudsman are involved, protection of civil rights, or how the civil society is functioning, and how the legislation process is negotiated, if consulted with stakeholders and so on. So the report on the rule of law has provoked anger in some member countries. Even the report tries to be objective and it doesn't criticize the suspects or things as independence of media in the member countries. So continuation of issuing such reports as prevention and disclosing problems and for starting dialogue among member states or in member states. And there's also the European Action Plan for Democracy, where we defined actions on three fronts. The first one is keeping independence and integrity of the elections, then independence of media, and fight against disinformation. The universal pillar is support of civil society, civil participation. And this material includes some legislation bills or and then this year, the Commission will to bring the legislation frame to increase transparency in online political advertisements. The election is an important moment in the life of democracy, and once one election is ended, then the new election cycle is starting. And there are some principles and some valid procedures which have to be adhered to. And so a few weeks before the election, there are more details, and rules for online world, such as funding of political campaign, or rules on election campaigns are efficient for the online world, or the rules of real world are often efficient in the online world because of its different nature. So it's like election in 2016 in the United States are an example. So we decided to set general rules on transparency of political messages during either during the whole election cycle or at the special time right before an election. And as far as disinformation is concerned, the Commission issued a proposal of regulation of Digital Service Act law. So this is again a document which defines or stipulates the behavior, the rules of behavior on the internet for companies with the aim to prevent spreading of illegal content. This is an important act or an important bill, but this may take some time before it was accepted and established. An important moment, an important thing is that within the European budget has been approved, and the program called the law, equality and values, and the program has existed even before, but it had limited resources and was always focused on a specific topic like a gender equality, rights of sexual minorities, racial equality, protection of data, and so on. But this time the program has received much more money, and For the first time in the European history, it is a program to support European values, and we are thinking how to administer this program. It is aimed at support of non-profit organization, and I can remember when the Czech Republic joined the European Union. We as non-governmental organization, we were asking for funds, for a fund which would enable to continue in their advocating activities to non-government, non-profit organizations. This is a signal. Well, the joining of the European Union was seen as a signal that everything is perfect in the accessing countries. But the non-profit organizations said this is not the case. There are many drawbacks, many inadequacies which should be improved. Then I think this type of fund will finally be established, and there are many more things which the European Commission is planning, but we don't have so much time now. Well, thank you. Now we have two questions here. The first question is, can we change in the Czech Republic from prioritizing short-term goals and issues to long-term ones, and to direction of democracy? I'll attempt at answering this question. This is a huge problem, not only in Central Europe, it concerns all democratic societies. And I'll give an example. It's a bit awkward one, but I've spoken to a person from military news who is focused on Islamic terrorism, and he sighed and said, well, this is hard because they have time and we are limited with election by election period. So this meant that enemies of liberal democracy do not need to take any considerations. There are no risks they are facing, but democratic politicians must always strive for being re-elected. On the other hand, I think that societies which can become enthusiastic for long-term goals, which are clearly defined, at least, and achievable, they can do it. An example is the atmosphere and spirit in the Czech Republic after 1989, which was back to Europe, and there was a huge amount of energy in the society at that time. And, but after some time, this energy was exhausted. It was around 1996, and this enthusiasm ended with the accession of the Czech Republic in the European Union. And now we are facing a problem that we have lost a goal, something that would be understandable for the whole society and would be trusted that this can be achieved, the improvement of living standard and atmosphere in the society. So we will see if after COVID, maybe there will be time for society reflection. Maybe we need something like that to be able to prepare for a next crisis, to have a better functioning state, more less unjust distribution of public means, and so that we wouldn't have some like dead ends, like people excluded from society. So maybe this could make us take the care of the fate of the country in our hands. And I think there is no other possibility, other solution than hope and use all the means available in the social discourse to support this. We have to try.
I believe that it was a very good question. What happens if there is a short electoral period? This is something that dominant rulers never have to answer. The question these people don't need to answer in the case of a local election. We saw that when during the pandemic problems, if there were no elections in the autumn, we would never see any progress in the solution. This is a problem of democracy, a problem of a specific political party or political leader or group of people is being evaluated, assessed by electorate. The problem, I believe, is elsewhere. I'm afraid of visions. Very often here we know of vision, foundation of Havel's. Sometimes you have a charismatic leader with a vision, and when he leaves, like Chavez, for example, the socialist system for the 21st century. If I go one step lower, where I see the problem of short-term electorate period, it need not be that much of a problem if you have functioning institutions and strategy works well, the concept works well. We didn't want any planning, but to tell the truth, when you take the Minister of Defense, what they purchased and whether it was wrong or right, but for a long time there was no coherent concept of our defense. Then each government, as they came, could purchase panduras, the armored vehicles or the airplanes, but they never ask the question whether it falls within the concept of defense or not. And if we take one ministry after another, you never had any basic concepts which gave an enormous opportunity to move among various subsidies, contributions, where money can be found in what way, without really having to substantiate, justify it. Because the governments in democracies, in most cases, are only make major, slight adjustments. Big reforms are very costly. And in democracies, you tend to do only partial adjustments. And when a big reform is being prepared, it is usually after only agreement with the opposition. And these concepts were ruled out. Things were changed with new administration coming. Take the education and schools. Remember what is being done, not to mention the latest pronouncement of the minister, but even before that, what the school leave examination should look like, what should be included and what should not. It's unbelievable. We have been discussing it over 20 years, and each year new school leavers are not sure what form the exam will take. How can you teach if you get the first graders and you don't know what the situation will look like 4 years later? We have several times spoke about the state. State must have certain autonomy against those who operate and against the other countries. So it's not like banana country. Building the independent state is the important thing, that you have basic concept, pandemic plans, which was put together recently, was really written in 2011. You had crisis authorities which did not have really basic principles agreed, like who's going to head it. And the objective in individual partial things should lead to situation where the political parties must respond to. Madam?
Tak já jenom rychle, aby jsme ještě stihli nějakou další otázku.
Very briefly.
Ta původní tedy byla, jestli lze.
The question was whether in the Czech Republic can we go to a long-term strategy and not to prioritize short-term objectives. We can do that, but it must be implemented by somebody, by a political party with some value stabilization anchoring, and this should be expressed in their program. So their framework should be clear from the beginning and later made more detailed. In the Czech Republic, the inability of long-term systematic thinking was obvious. This is a question of pension reform, healthcare reforms, educational reform. This is a sore point of the incomplete transformation process that was ended, but not with all aspects being really resolved. We have two more questions ready. One is about Slovakia. In Slovakia, they're experiencing coalition crisis. How will the problems of the disintegrating government are in line with this idea of complying with the possible of revival in the post-COVID period. The second question concerns the Czech Republic. How do you view the threat that the next government will implement very unpopular measures like tax reforms, that it will strengthen the position of populists? Can we get prepared for this? So how do we view the Slovak political situation and what may happen to the next Czech government? Would you like to answer any of these two questions? Please do. The floor is yours. Perhaps, but we would need perhaps a crystal ball to answer those two questions.
Vladimíru nebo?
Madam,
Ne, pan Honzejk byl, já jsem chtěla jen zaplnit to, ale já se pak takže pane Honzejk.
No, sir.
Děkuji moc. Já jenom jako velice stručně k tomu Slovensku.
As far as Slovakia is concerned, Mr. Matovič government very nicely demonstrate that saying that one should beware of fulfilled wishes because they may get fulfilled. People in Slovakia were very angry with what Robert Fico did. So in the end, they were happy, joyous when Matovič won the elections. About whom it was known. You could come to Brno and you see that it will be a big problem because compared to Matovič, Babiš is somebody whose measures can be envisaged. I don't think that there can be any renaissance in liberal democratic policies in Slovakia after the COVID period, because Matovič is impersonation of illiberal tendencies. He's a person who wants to centralize all the power in his hand, or master of micromanagement, similar to Mr. Babiš. And the COVID epidemic only accentuated the problems which would not perhaps appear without the COVID period. The question is whether some nostalgia wins after not very aesthetic patronage system established by Robert Fico. Everything is possible. Or whether the Slovak society will say, okay, that was a dead-end alley. Matovič was no way. So let us take another look whether there is a model which can work well, and perhaps they will implement something that works well in Western Europe. In Slovakia, what will be important is that they maintain something that happened at the very beginning, and the effort to come up with a reform. That is one of the problems that emerged in Slovakia, on non-functional, not independent judicial, that led to the murder and a big problem. And if anybody who comes after this government, and I believe the constitutional processes that will remain in place, thanks to President Čaputová, who will certainly wisely decide to whose hands she will place the reins of the government. So if they manage to, in some way, to start and finish manage the reform of the judicial. That will at least be one good signal that Slovakia will manage things sufficiently. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming very quickly to the point when we will have to end this conference. If you have any last comments, perhaps. It doesn't seem so. So I'm afraid that I will have to abuse my position of a master of ceremonies and declare this seminar terminated. I would like to thank all those who participated in the roundtable discussion, people who presented their papers during this day. And it is obvious that personal encounters are important and interesting, but if these are not possible, I believe that it is also important and interesting to discuss things online. So I hope that we will again meet offline again. Ladies and gentlemen, have a nice day. Thank you.